So, probably about 3 months ago, I think that was the first time that I saw anything about Bryan Johnson and his blueprint. And the very first thing that I thought of when I saw what Bryan was doing was it was basically Joel Fuhrman's G-Bombs diet. I mean, it was very, very close to the diet portion. And even the moderate calorie restriction, a lot of it seemed inspired by Joel Fuhrman. And at the time, I was doing basically a high fat, almost keto kind of diet. And the reason why I got into that particular diet, well, let me back up a little bit. I was I started being following a vegan diet in 2012, and I followed the vegan diet for about 8 years, 100% vegan. And around 2020, that's when I first started reading and listening to reading Ray Peat's writings and watching some of his interviews on YouTube. And I just got totally convinced by everything that he was saying. And so I started following the Ray Peat diet, basically. Although he would have never he never really said he had a Ray Peat diet. He just kind of interpreted the science and gave people recommendations. But his basic recommendations are to follow a high sugar, or probably he would recommend a high fruit diet, along with high dairy consumption, low fat dairy, also some cheese, red meat, and then he also recommended things like coffee and aspirin and the fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. And so I was doing that kind of diet for a couple of years, and I was eating an enormous amount of sugar. But the thing is, I just felt totally amazing. My health was fantastic. I just felt great. And when I say a lot of sugar, I mean probably it's about like 200 grams of sugar a day, which is like, a cereal bowl full of sugar. And what I would do is I would pour water, add water to the sugar, heat it on the stove into a syrup, and then add the syrup to, skim milk and orange juice, and just consume it that way. And I really loved the diet, and I just thought it was the greatest thing ever, and didn't plan on ever leaving it. But about a year ago, I started having tinnitus or tinnitus, and I've been playing in a praise band, and I was exposed to loud music. I'm not really sure what the source of the problem was. I had tinnitus a couple of years before that, playing in a band and being exposed to loud music. So the problem came back last September, about 10 months ago. And I was very concerned about it at the time, and I had heard one of these speakers on YouTube, Ben Bickman, who's a pro-keto, high-fat diet kind of speaker, a college professor, and an expert on he's an expert on insulin, and he thought that the source of tinnitus was insulin resistance. And if you did followed a diet that lowered your insulin, mainly a low carb diet, that would reduce the issues that you have with tinnitus. And I didn't really know. I'd tried a ketogenic diet in the past, found it very difficult, but I gave it another shot, and for about 2 or 3 months I followed a very low carb diet, and was eating a lot of meat and a lot of cheese, and just trying to limit my carbs as much as possible. I stopped drinking skim milk or 1% milk, and I was just drinking half and half. But I cut out all the sugar. And I would have to say that it did reduce tinnitus, the ringing in my ears, but it didn't resolve it. And the problem was the ringing was always there. It just wasn't as loud. Um, and I didn't really feel that great. I mean, I felt terrible, and my energy level was extremely low. And so when I saw Bryan Johnson and the Furman-inspired blueprint diet that he was following, I just decided to switch over and start doing that. And so I followed that for about since February, so probably about 5 or 6 months now. And generally, I felt okay. I mean, I was doing calorie restriction as well, so my energy level was really low. But health-wise, I did feel pretty good. My health has been good, but my energy level was terrible, and my weight was extreme. I continued to lose weight, and so during that time, I took the first true diagnostic test because I wanted to see how my lifestyle compared with other people in Bryan Johnson's Rejuvenation Olympics. And my score was 0.78, which is it's pretty competitive. I mean, it's pretty good. But I just wasn't really, I mean, my energy level was so low, I really was just not really happy. I started taking rapamycin, which is part of Joel Furman's, not Joel Furman, Bryan Johnson's blueprint protocol. And this is something, rapamycin is something that it's basically an mTOR inhibitor, so it kind of is another thing that reduces your energy level, but when they tested in mice, it led to a significant extension and maximum longevity. So I thought, well, I mean, if I'm going to compete with Bryan Johnson, I've got to get a prescription for rapamycin. You need a prescription for rapamycin. And along with that, I got a prescription for acarbose, which is something that Bryan also takes, another prescription drug. And that's one that reduces your blood sugar spikes by basically delaying where carbs are digested in your digestive tract, and it delays the digestion to your large colon or further down in your small intestine. And this is another thing that that extended longevity when they tested it in mice. Both rapamycin and acarbose were both basically like two of the best interventions that were tested by something called the ITP, which is the Interventions Testing Program. That's a government body, part of the NIA, National Institute of Aging, where researchers can submit ideas for compounds that they believe may be beneficial for longevity, and this government group will conduct a they'll do a test with mice in 3 different lab locations and figure out if the compound does actually extend lifespan in mice. And most of the compounds have not extended lifespan. The one that seems to have done the best so far is rapamycin, and acarbose also did well, and they kind of have different methods of action. Rapamycin being, an mTOR inhibitor. So I was doing all of these things, but my energy level was just terrible. Taking rapamycin, I basically just felt dead for like a day after taking it. And I started to wonder, like, if this is the life I want to lead. And so I started thinking about how great I felt when I was on the Peat diet. And I started reading his articles again on his website. And he goes through, at length, the dangers of polyunsaturated fats. And when you follow Bryan Johnson's blueprint, I mean, I was eating a lot of brown rice, which is high in PUFA, and beans have PUFA. And I just was eating a significant amount of PUFA. And I started to think, I wonder if that really would make a difference in this true diagnostic epigenetic aging test. It would be interesting. I mean, before I got back into Peat, I basically was just doing what Bryan Johnson was doing, with a little bit more calorie restriction than he was doing, but less exercise and I wasn't taking all of the supplements that he was taking. And I wasn't doing all the interventions that he was doing. So I was wondering, how, I would just have a result that wasn't as good as his. So I thought, well, I mean, maybe I should try something different. And I had felt amazingly well on the Peat diet in the past. Why not go back to it, try it again, and see what happens? So I do have another test. There's true age pace. So I'm going to hold on to that and kind of get into the Peat diet for a bit and see how it all works out. But I'm thinking probably in a few weeks I'll take that true age test and see where my new numbers come out. And it'll be a great comparison between kind of following Bryan Johnson / Joel Furman calorie restriction kind of diet versus the Peat pro-metabolic diet. So I'm really curious to see how the results come out, and I'll be sure to make a video once I get the results. All right, thanks.